I'm Eric Parker this morning on CT22, digging into the results of our exclusive CT Insider Channel 3 Western New England University political poll. What does the poll tell us about the campaigns for governor and Senate and how they're going? Our panel of experts is offering insight. And college athletes can now make money off their names, images, and likenesses. But how does it work? The man who oversees what's known as NIL for UConn is joining us to explain. And in our Sunday Spotlight, we're getting to know a little bit more about Channel 3's newest meteorologist, Mike Slifer. It's all ahead. This first Sunday of October, CT22 starts right now.
From WFSB, this is CT22 with Eric Parker, sponsored by Hartford Healthcare.
Good morning. With just over 5 weeks left until Election Day, we're getting some indication on how the campaigns are going. One is the exclusive polling we did with our political partners, CT Insider and Western New England University's Polling Institute, the results of which we released over the past week. One part of that survey focused on the governor's race, where our poll of likely voters showed that Governor Ned Lamont is ahead by 15 points with a margin of error of plus or minus 5%. Lamont leads Bob Stefanowski 55% to 40%. The second part of the survey looks at the Senate race. Incumbent Senator Richard Blumenthal is ahead of his Republican challenger, Leora Levy, 53% to 40%. Here to help us analyze the results and to dig into some of the other questions asked in the survey are Channel 3's chief political reporter, Susan Rav, Dan Haar, columnist and associate editor at Hearst, Connecticut Media, which is CT Insider, and Dr. Tim Versalati, the director of the Western New England University Polling Institute. Dr. Versalati, I want to start with you. Your folks asked these questions. I know I've heard you say it's a snapshot in time. So what does that mean? What should people take from these results?
So this is the state of the race as we head into the final 5 weeks. And it is a snapshot in that this could be a moving target. What we see, though, is with the Democrat Ned Lamont up by 15 points, that it's a pretty big gap to close. So if Bob Stefanowski is going to gain any ground, he's got to do it fairly soon.
And we saw a similarly large gap in the Senate race. Snapshot in time, Susan, but maybe a telling snapshot.
A telling snapshot. I agree that anything can happen. I mean, we have 5 weeks to go, but I think this is a comfortable lead both for Governor Lamont and Senator Richard Blumenthal. Both of them not only have good overall numbers, but especially Lamont, he has a very high favorability rating. Stefanowski does not. I think Stefanowski's is only about 36%, which is lower than his favorability rating. And I see the biggest challenge for even both candidates, and that is trying to reach out to unaffiliated and independent voters, because those voters, which are the largest voting bloc here in our state, a lot of them are undecided.
Dan, I know we were talking earlier, and you made a point about some of that favorability stuff, and I think Susan just teed it up for you, so I want to ask you about it right now. We have also favorability for Stefanowski with Republicans and Lamont with Democrats, and you think those numbers might be a key?
Well, I think the overall theme here is that Stefanowski can turn this around with his message, but he's sort of boxed in a little bit because Lamont is not far to the left, right? So Blumenthal may be further to the left than Lamont, so that may give Leora Levy, if she cared about the middle, which she doesn't seem to, that would give her room. But the fact that Lamont has 10% favorability only among Democrats tells you that there's a proportion of people who are not really with him in the Democratic Party, but they may vote for him anyway because they're probably further to the left than he is.
He also has some challenges to do with men. I mean, both Democrats in this race do better with women,
right? But
Blumenthal is not liked very much among men, so that could be a challenge for him, I think.
It's a bit of a surprise that Leora Levy, being female, gets the same 32% as Bob Stefanowski. It's a roughly 2-to-1 women to men to women.
I think we have that graphic, if we can put it up, and it shows women likely voters with Leora Levy, and that's something that you think is a
What
big
I meant to say is it's 2-to-1 Democrat, whether it's Lamont or Blumenthal, to Republican among women. That's what I meant to say. And then so the 32%, it's a bit surprising to me that hers isn't higher there.
Right, it's almost double.
Right, and that Stefanowski, why should Stefanowski have the same? That may tell you, and maybe Tim can help us out here. Is that really a party thing, or is that more of a, is that more about who they are?
Dan has hit the nail on the head there. It's definitely a party thing. And we routinely see a gender gap where women are far more likely to go for the Democratic candidate, men typically more likely to go for the Republican, although in these two races, the Republican candidates need to do much, much better with men in order to close the gap. It is a party label. It is almost a reflex for voters.
Tim, can I ask you a question? Also in your poll, and I read that men tend to vote Republican. But what about the fact that there are voters out there who are still undecided? I mean, do you think in the last 5 weeks that people will automatically, or what do the candidates have to do for someone to say, I want to vote for them?
Yeah. What we found in both races was the percentage of undecideds is in single digits. So because the leads are double digits, what each of the Republicans has to do is not only win some undecideds, they've got to flip some voters who have said they're going with the Democrats. So these next few weeks are critical with messaging and outreach as well to reach some voters to try to change their minds.
In sports, that's called controlling your own destiny versus needing help from the other team. So right now, Tampa Bay needs help from Toronto if it wants to get into the top spot in the wild card.
Go ahead.
I want to talk a little bit about the favorability ratings. Blumenthal's are lower than they should be for a second-term senator in an overwhelmingly Democratic and unaffiliated state. At 40, was it 42 or 46, or it's 46 to 42. Lamont's, on the other hand, are over 51, and then in politics, I think, Tim can bear this out, that's sort of a threshold. It's very hard to beat someone with an over 50% favorability rating because those are solid voters.
Yeah, so Tim, what do you make of those numbers? And tell people, when you do your polling, how do you get to those numbers? What is it you're asking the voter to come up with this favorable and unfavorable?
So we begin by saying, we're going to ask you about some people active in public life. Please let us know if you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion. If you haven't heard of them or have no opinion, just tell me and we'll move on. And we give just the name. Sometimes, because I monitor the interviews, the respondent will say, well, who is this? And the interviewers are trained to say, well, I'm just going to give you the name. And if you haven't heard from them, we'll move on. So they don't have that party label to guide them. And I have to agree, Dan makes a good point about Blumenthal. I was surprised by that 46-42 favorable, unfavorable. And it just occurs that because he's been in the public eye for so long, there may be views that are just baked in from going back to his days as a state attorney general, and then he's finishing up his second term in the Senate. Whereas Lamont, although he's run for statewide office prior to running for governor, he's shooting for his second term. He hasn't been in the public eye as long as Blumenthal. Perhaps that helps to explain some of the difference.
Do you think that incumbents face that sometimes? I mean, someone who's been in office for a long time, you have time to figure out if you like someone, whereas someone's new, you may not have a real strong opinion one way or another.
That's absolutely right. It's not just the opinion you hold, but the intensity or the strength of that opinion. And the longer you are in the public eye, the stronger that view becomes. And it becomes very difficult to dislodge or change.
You know, with 20 years covering news in Connecticut, I can't believe there's 3% have never heard of Dick Blumenthal. I've interviewed him like 10,000 times. I want to ask you guys, with double digits, even with the margin of error, we're looking at double digits overall in these races among likely voters. What kinds of things could maybe flip that, just having covered politics for a long time? If someone's just watching this horse race over the last 5 weeks, what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, I think Ned Lamont, Governor Lamont, is doing something strategically, and that is, since he is kind of in the driver's seat with these numbers, he's decided not to do more than 2 debates this year. The last time he did 5. I think they have some challenges with independents, unaffiliated, men and women on both sides. So it'd be interesting to see if the ads maybe that they're going to change the tone of the campaign, that they're trying to do that, or just sit tight. I'm not sure.
30 seconds, Dan.
I see a path to victory for Bob Stefanowski because they're both going after the middle and because he's talking about the issues that are resonating with people, crime, economy, and he's right on the issues in some ways, even though he's not getting those votes. I don't see a path for Leora Levy because she's not going after that middle, even though she's closer. The only way either of them wins if the other one screws up. Terry McAuliffe saying parents don't matter in Virginia, an opening for Glenn Youngkin, the governor, that sort of thing. Blumenthal less likely to do it, both because he's more disciplined and because he's less daily in the public eye.
All right. Dan Haar, CT Insider, also known as Hearst Connecticut Media. Susan Raff, our chief political reporter, Dr. Tim Burst live from Western New England. Thank you very much for all of you being with us. And of course, there's a lot more to dig into on these polls, but that's just the tip of the iceberg stuff. Thank you all for being here. Make sure you tune into Channel 3 all next week. We'll explore the final part of the poll on the issues Connecticut voters say are most important to them when deciding who they'll vote for. Susan will be kicking off her reporting on that tomorrow. And Dan is writing about those issues as well. Check out his columns on ctinsider.com and in Hearst, Connecticut's newspapers. Those are all listed right there on your screen.